kind
Are we
of...
having a very large roundtable now?
Yes, now we're having a larger roundtable, more of a thing about the thoughts that you had. Or we're having our circle now, we're having a circle. It's circle time.
Circle time, yeah.
Circle time. We don't have a little ABC mat, unfortunately, but yeah, so what were some of the things that in your groups you identified as challenges that low-income people face when it comes to fire, working on fire, or even achieving fire? Does anybody have anything they want to share? These are in our small group.
I'll share from our group. I'll share from our
Share
group.
from your group, yeah, like kind of a summary, yeah.
All right, so one of them was the stigmatism of poverty, right? So the communities out there, they're poor, they kind of slide on the side. They think what's going on is a handout instead of a hand up. So changing that was one. Everything that they do has an opportunity cost that they don't always see. The payday loan, right? To get me through the payday, how much that actually hurts them on the long term, they don't quite understand that. Another challenge for them. Reducing spending, right? We talk about reduce spending, increase income. And in that lower level of poverty, reducing spending is hard because you usually already cut yourself to the bone, right? To get your rent and not get kicked out and stuff. And then, so go get a bigger job, right? That's what you hear on a lot of podcasts. You got two choices, reduce spending or go get a better job. Well, without educational means or them understanding what services that are out there, so that's another barrier for them, is that they don't understand where they can get a hand up instead of a hand out, and they don't understand the financial literacy. So even on some of the groups that we've done, when we were talking about that, writing out a budget and then showing them what it is, they actually might have a little in there, but they just don't understand that because of their expertise level. And then
Just higher cost of living.
higher cost of living, transportation costs, they may not have a car, or gas has gone up, so now do they cut and maybe jump the bus? Is that cheaper? They don't think through all of that stuff because they don't know. Those are some of the barriers that came up in our discussion.
And what about in your group?
Some similar things, talked about education level, so that can definitely relate back to services and other ways that you can be assisted. And there are lots of resources out there, but if you don't know the question to ask, you're not going to find it. One that came up for us was family, and that people who are working their way out of poverty are often the sole responsible party for helping other members in their family, and that can be a significant impediment to making personal gains when you need to share that with the family. Help me out, people.
Anybody?
That one's really good. We've seen that where people barely making it are now having to cover their mom and dad because they didn't plan.
Yeah, I think
And that straps them.
Doug mentioned that one, and once he said it, it was like, yeah, that is a huge thing that, I know I'm not thinking of that because I don't have those drains for myself, but I definitely know people, and personally I would say I see that often represented a lot more in minority communities, where they are very much expected to help the family, and that makes it hard, and on some level it may be, it may actually be like a reason not to, because I have seen some people where their families expect more of them than they have to give simply because it's perceived that they're doing better, so they should be able to give endlessly.
Yeah, I have that money tree growing in my
Right.
backyard. That's what's on.
Yeah.
So, any thoughts out here? Okay.
We talked a little bit about mindset. Some folks, some families think they can't get out. They're stuck in their own stuckness. And with our plan, with our program, we let them know that they can, and we give them the tools to do it, and we help them use the tools. And once they realize they can get out, then it could change their life. And we only have so much will. We have to learn new habits.
And with mindset, we also talked about visibility and the fact that finance is not typically discussed. And then with the societal perspectives that those who are struggling financially are doing so due to a personal fault, so a sense of failure that may come with that.
Yep.
And if there aren't places where those discussions can be had and the various issues can be normalized and worked through with respect, shame and all of those things can definitely impact getting anywhere.
Right. Yeah.
So one of the questions we asked also in our group, and it'd be interesting to see a show of hands here, how many of you went to school and there was some kind of financial literacy in one of the classes that you took? The reason I do that is they pulled it out of the schools and it's not getting any better. And so a lot of the lower, what we're talking about, it's not in school for them to even learn how to get out of the cycle.
Right. We talked about that.
Why do you think it's not in our schools?
Why do I think it's not? I'm not going to get politically crucified. I don't think people thought it was important. I think that part of it's your mom, so we were talking about that. My mom forced me as a jock in school, so I played a lot of ball. But she made me take home ec, and that's where it was in that class. I hated it. I had to learn to sew, I had to carry the stupid egg around for 2 weeks, and I had to find a job. And some of you guys are laughing, you remember that, right? So I had to do that. That was where financial literacy was. Probably the best class I ever took. Now I can sew for myself. I know how to cook for myself. I can do everything independently, but financial literacy was in there. And today they're so worried about math and English and science and not leaving a kid behind that they've taken some of the stuff of life skills out. Mm-hmm. And they just want to teach that, and then I'm not going to go in there. I'm not going to go in
You'll never be poor.
What?
As long as you can do math, you'll never be poor.
Yeah, but that's
If you master
true.
trigonometry, you won't be broke. Is that how it works?
So they pulled it out of the schools. Politics has played a part in it. Leadership has played a part in it. And I think people are starting to realize it now. So one of the things we're doing is trying to get some of it back into schools and get teachers interested. I don't know why they would have pulled it out. Maybe politicians aren't as smart as my mom was. I'll say it that way.
You mentioned it's a generational thing.
Yeah.
Because I know my parents all had that.
Right.
But I'm wondering if that generation has a different mindset towards money. You know, it was easy to get by on a single family income. If budgeting wasn't so crucial and critical. So maybe it is kind of they didn't consider it necessary, so it was easy to take off the table, but now when you have to figure out where to put that back in there, nobody wants to cut their class.
Well, you bring up a great point in that. So when I was growing up, not millennial, all right, my dad was the breadwinner when I was young, and then my mom went to work, right? That's when mothers started to go back to work. So now you get two incomes, and that second income helps makes things better. To where now we've gone, there's a lack of delayed gratification, right? But now people are having to work two jobs just to pay for all the stuff they buy. Where when my mom went to work, that was our savings account. That's where we started to build the savings in the family. Where now you gotta have two people to pay the rent on a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, $3,400 a month. You almost gotta have two incomes to pay that. So where does the savings come from? So some of that's taking it out of control. And I'm not the financial person, so I'll let these. I've said
That whole
enough.
situation is so loaded. The slow boil that got us there. We all have many thoughts.
We have thoughts. But no, well, I was just gonna say, one of the things that struck me, just kind of going back and listening to some of the discussions and everything else, was, and then some of the things that we hear, right? One of the things we hear is it's expensive to be poor, right? And it's not just about like whether you have the education or the literacy to take care of it. It's like, well, if you're going to open a bank account, do you have enough money to open the bank account? If you're going to, if you want a job anymore, you can't just go around with a resume and wear a nice suit and just pass out your resumes. No, everybody wants you to apply online. So what happens if you don't have access to the internet?
Right.
You know?
Just go to the
when
library,
you
they
work-
say, but how many hours is that gonna take?
Well, not even just at the library. What happens if you're working all day and the library closes at 6? When are you supposed to use the internet? And so there are a lot of those kinds of issues that are barriers as well, that are just kind of set up in society where so many of us are just like, oh, well, I call it the just problem. just do this. And there are just all of these things that make it difficult.
I know we've had conversations in my community. One that comes to mind in the last month or two was somebody who had broken out of a poverty cycle by their own statements of it. But they were trying to tell other people, kind of, just do this, I did this, just do this, just click coupon, like all of the regular stuff. And many of us kind of came in to say that all of these things take a whole lot of time and effort, and for people who are already working 40 and 50 hours a week, it's not the activity necessarily that might be the problem, but the time that it can take to get all of these things done on top of all of the other things you're doing, or the extra expenses that go into all these incremental things, they add up really quickly to a point that they're often not beneficial.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the other issues that you run into, we've been talking a little bit about empathy and inclusivity, and one of the issues that I see a lot in my community with neurodivergent folks is that everything seems set up to make somebody with ADHD just give up immediately. like there's just so many things that you have to do, and I'm fortunate in that I've been masking and coping for most of my life, and I've just kind of powered through because I was raised in a community that I just had to power through. But a lot of people, these barriers make it even more difficult.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to say something. While we're kind of on this, folks have touched on this in kind of a practical way. And Taylor, to come back to your question, when you were talking about why isn't it being taught, I really think that if we really got to step back to the basics. We're all humans. We all are social creatures. We all want to be loved. We all want to be respected. And we all want to be able to achieve our dreams. And one of the things that we see when you go back and you look at studies, and partly why we've taken the family approach, and I love the fact that you guys do women, because that is such a hard-hit area. But you've got families, and if you have somebody that wants to say, I want to do better, like I said, I was the first person in my entire family to go to college. While they were proud of me, they also resented it. And it made it really hard. And that's one of the things, when you're in a family unit, whether you like it or not, we want to be accepted and loved and to be appreciated by the people we care about. And if you're trying to break out of what everybody else around you knows, they're going to hold on to you. And that's one of the biggest things we see, is that I can't dream because so-and-so's going to, my family isn't going to put up with this. And it's really, that internal dynamic is a real huge barrier to be able to break through that. That's part of the reason why we take the family approach, because if you get the whole family in there realizing they can dream and that they can do this together as a unit, and there's not one person doing the lift, but you've got everybody doing their part, there's a better chance for success. And I think that's a longer term approach.
Did you have something?
No,
Okay.
I'm saying this is perfect.
Perfect time to move to number 2. So this is one that I think is really interesting, because it's one that can help us think about, okay, so now we've identified the problem, how do we look for the resources to help solve it? So what resources help FIRE feel more achievable on a low income, and how do we tailor these resources to our communities? So what were some of the thoughts? Does anybody want to jump in, or do we want to?
I can say in our group, I think a lot of what we came to were people as resources, and different ways that people can help each other, one as a place of knowledge, as a source of a safe place to talk about these things, because we don't have that in the larger community. It's
Yeah, it
not
has
like
to be
you go
safe.
up to someone.
Yeah.
a lack of judgment, compassion or empathy, being able to share your situation or understanding their situation. So there's a lot about that.
That's why I felt like it was a good jump off from what you were saying, because if it is that your given community, which is often your family, is not supportive, then there are, ways potentially you can form new communities and try to focus more in those areas with people who are more supportive of your goals. It doesn't mean you have to abandon family, but if you have alternative means of finding that place of acceptance and compassion and where you can be comfortable, it can help to balance a little bit of that stress and that otherness that people can feel when they're breaking from their traditional dynamic.
Well, and they can even bring their family members along,
They can.
which is really the wonderful part about it, because they see the success, and they are then encouraged to come too.
And I liked what you said though about people and the communities. I know that we have buy nothing groups. In my community, swap meets are starting to make a comeback where I live, and so they do a swap meet like once a month, and which is really interesting to me that it's a thing that's happening again. And I think that also the idea of thrifting is becoming once again, more popular, and so those kinds of things and making them more visible and part of your community, I think, really does help as well.
We also
Can
talked-
I?
Go
ahead,
ahead.
We
Taylor,
also
sorry.
talked about just the increasing amount of people online, talking about personal finance and for individuals to see people online that they can connect with and relate to. And it's free information a lot of times, and so I think that's really important and easily accessible because it's online. I mean, maybe not easily accessible, people don't have the internet, but a little bit easier than, maybe meeting with someone in person and having to pay for their time.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't want to call anybody out in particular, but I was going to say that Laura had a great thing that she talked about in our group, talking about the heart of people, again, coming back to, as you talked about, sharing and swapping and thrifting and all of those things, and just to see how things elevated from that. And it just starts out that basic. So we're not even talking about, financial literacy, but we're talking about sharing of the resources that we have. And so again, I think it came back to just a beautiful mind shift of how we can help each other in ways that we maybe didn't think about.
And I think part of the issue is we talked a little bit about the stigma that comes with it. When we talk about these things and talk about other resources, one of the things I notice, I volunteer at the soup kitchen and the food basket in my community, and a lot of people are embarrassed of having to go, and a lot of people are, because in our society we connect it with a moral issue.
Right.
And so if we can, in our communities, be willing to talk about this and be more open about, hey, if you need help, it's okay to get help. Maybe that helps as well, is being us going back to our communities and saying, hey, if we need help, let's get help.
Well, I think that plays in for the people in this room, because there's a good friend of mine that is at Fire. He's there, but he participates in all of those groups, and he actually takes from the swap meets. So he takes and gives back, and what he's trying to do with taking stuff instead of always giving is to show people that it is okay to get help from somebody else. That it's not just the poor people that take these things and the well-off are putting them in there. It's a swap. It's back and forth both. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I wanted to kind of throw out is we talked about, I think that as they get educated and they get a hand up, the internet's that double-edged sword, right? You look at it, and I don't know how many of you guys browse, but we talked about this a little bit. So you can spend an hour and waste your time looking at sites that say you become financially well off going to their site, and then they're promoting stuff that you can't touch, right? And then so one of the things that we talked a little bit about was in those communities, your shared communities, and there's, I think it's called Next Door now.
Mhm.
They're starting to put up some sites that are helping people find sharing communities and stuff like that.
Right.
So instead of weeding through Google that's got everybody that's telling you buy crypto and you'll be a millionaire next week, it gives you some actually good or better advice. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just,
We're just laughing
We're laughing
because we
about
know
the
what's,
crypto,
we know,
'cause we're-
and we know many of those sites that sometimes
Yeah.
tell you that they're gonna,
yeah,
So I think for us, we can promote the sites that actually help people.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. Any other thoughts?
well, I just wanted to point out for Larry, like I think the principle on the buy nothing groups is that it's not supposed to be a needs-based thing. It's
Correct.
just an exchange.
Yeah, exactly.
I can say that in many of the buy nothing groups, it's still, the ground rules are not always respected in that sense, and it still
Correct.
becomes a, who has the worst story. So I like the ones that do encourage people to just, give freely and not have to rationalize.
Right.
Well, and I think that speaks too into how do we start, modeling these behaviors in ourselves and in our communities to say, like, get away from this idea of who deserves, who's the deserving poor and who doesn't deserve our help, right? We have that idea of who deserves things, and so how do we start modeling the behaviors that we want to see reflected?
I know we just did a giving thread in our community. We kick these off from time to time to celebrate our 60,000 members. And we just say, for this one, we started it off as leadership and say, we're going to give away $30 to 2 people who could need it. Just let us know. And we encourage all of the other members to give freely. And, if anybody wants to comment, and there's some money, and I wasn't able to monitor it because I was driving up here, but I saw there was a lot of activity on there, and some people say, well, I'd rather give it to a charity, I'd rather do this, and we say it's $30, like whatever. What are they gonna do with it? That do you really need to inspect if somebody deserves $30? Like, do you have $30 to give?
What's funny, we talked about that, that's an American culture.
Yeah.
Because over in Romania, I used to run a team in Romania, they actually did that in the office. So if any family was struggling that month, a kid got sick, they couldn't afford the doctor or whatever, they had a community voluntary chip-in fund that they would put into, all the employees would, and they had a little board that would sit down and say, okay, who's gonna get that charity fund? And if nobody needed it that month, they would carry. So that when somebody did need it, they would have it. And they were just given $1 or $2. And it's funny, that's like $20 to us, because they don't get paid that much. But it was interesting to watch those young kids do it versus what we do here.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of that if you deserve it or not. And I've tried to point out to some people, like, we have an interest in using charities in America, and it's they definitely serve a purpose. There's a lot of good in charitable giving through nonprofits, but sometimes it also feels like you're paying somebody to vet somebody's value in deserving that money. And if you could gain some comfort in just giving freely, maybe split half of it up with charities and half of it up with just free giving. How much of your give actually gets to where it needs to go?
Right.
And are you just paying someone to, like, validate your conscience on who is worthy? So we like to encourage people to just give a little bit and not to assign value to it. Do you have something to give, and are you willing to do it? And that can be time, that can be money, that can be whatever, but just to encourage some of that spirit of giving, and start it at like a low level too, where people feel like it's comfortable and achievable, and they don't have to overthink it, and that it's okay if it goes to waste sometimes, because who are you to judge what waste is?
The other thing that we as a group can do, I think, is we can talk to our politicians. Deb and I have gone up and met with the senator, what was his name?
Senator
You didn't-
Ron.
Senator Moore.
So we didn't get very far, but we opened the door, and what we're trying to get politicians to understand is that there are some good programs out there to help people move forward and give them a hand up, but it doesn't do a lot of good if you just give them the money and then don't help them to the next level. That's gonna take a lot of work.
And kind of along with that, so I'm a big fan of local politics and being involved locally.
Right.
With your city councils, with your school boards, with your state legislatures, because that's where you have a chance to actually connect with people, and where you have a chance to also connect in your community. And also I'm a big proponent of working with like-minded local organizations, which is why I focus on like the soup kitchen, the food basket, because you can see what's going on in the community and you can be a part of that. And when you're a part of that, then you connect to other people and you learn about more resources. And I've been able to, through that, been able to say, when somebody comes to me and says, oh, well, we need somebody who needs emergency housing. They've just lost their job, they're just losing their apartment, they need emergency housing. And because of the connections I've made in the community, I can say, oh, my friend Karen knows emergency housing, and let's connect you with Karen, and they'll find a resource. We have a day center for our homeless, and we're working on putting the little units. I can't remember what they're called right now, but we're working on. There's a local church that will let us put those there for overnight things, especially in the winter, because I live in Idaho where it's very cold in the winter, and for homeless folk. And by being in the community and being able to work that, we can refer people to those resources that can eventually help them take that next step up, right? Because the first step is having that stability and knowing where you can go, and then you can start making progress toward the next step of your financial journey.
Another element for me personally is volunteerism. I donate a lot of my time, which if I was working my traditional job is fairly valuable, for my own personal reasons and a lot of fear around money, especially after my son's cancer diagnosis, because that could pop up again. I'm not comfortable giving a lot of money. I'm not ready to hand out cash. And even though if I look at the numbers, I know I should be able to, I'm mentally just not there. But I am comfortable giving time a lot, so I do a lot of volunteer activities, and that's another way that I encourage other people to give back, and without putting an expectation of them having to put up cash.
Yeah, so we've got our last question is, are there ways that reaching for financial independence can improve other areas of your life, even if it doesn't feel like FI is fully achievable? So what were some of the things you all talked about in your groups?
It's just your mental well-being.
Yeah.
You don't feel the need to drink or sleep the day away or stress eat or kick the dog.
Relieve family tension was a big one
Yeah.
in ours. Husband-wife fighting, stuff like that is a benefit.
When people do things that are a good thing, honor them, edify them, and make it specific, so they realize that you are worthy. What you've done, or the way you're thinking, or you're valued and you're noticed. Giving people your time and be a good listener, right?
Another one that came up out of our group was a more positive outlook for individuals. And we were talking about, you see the people walk on the street that look down and have the frown. Probably because they're insecure, thinking about something, maybe, or something. But if you're financially feeling good, you might have a little more pep in your step, right? Which would, you smile at somebody and they smile back, you just made somebody else's day better.
We talked about general empowerment kind of in those lines, that being able to boost yourself a little bit in something like finances often helps you feel more empowered in many other aspects of your life, and can give you that little bit of boost you need to feel like you can make other changes that might not be specifically related to money. setting those small goals and seeing yourself able to achieve with finances. Yeah, mental health, it all comes together, it always does. Yeah.
Yeah, you also talked about having a better sense of control or awareness about your situation. A lot of times if you don't have a deep understanding of your financial situation, you just know that you're constantly struggling or trying to make ends meet, and then you finally have an opportunity to see your big picture, right? No matter how it looks, there's, a lot of empowerment and I think clarity that comes with that. Just understanding it even at a baseline where it is.
Well, I think another thing we can think about too, as we talked a lot about empathy, we talked about community and paying it forward. If we think about it, there's a cliche that says a rising tide lifts all boats. And as one family gets stronger, that community gets stronger. And I mean, that's one of the things that we keep hearing about community. And it really does start at the lowest level. And what I mean that is that you start at the family level, you start at the individual level. And when that person and that family feels empowered and they can take the next step, and as they're starting to increase their speed, people that are around them start to come with them. And I'm just a firm believer, and again, part of this is I flip it back over to the financial side and the regulatory side, and then the other part I flip over to the humanitarian side for finances, right? But we actually, if we want to see our country and our world be healthier and happier and more productive, it literally starts within the four walls of a home. Because if you want to have a healthy community, you have to have a healthy family. And if you have a healthy family, and I'm talking financially healthy, as we've all shared, leads to being mentally happier, emotionally happier, feeling more productive, easing the burden on society as a whole, right? That will allow us to have a healthier community, which leads to a healthier state, which leads to a healthier country, which leads to a healthier world. But it all starts with that one. And so sometimes we don't have to think real big. We just have to think real honest.